Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Star Trek Reviews. My name is Alyssa, and this is my review for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 2, Episode 8, Excretus. And first off, the standard spoiler warning. If you have not seen up through the end of Season 2, Episode 8 of Lower Decks, blah, 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 etc., etc., why will you be watching this video? I have no idea. Anyways, diving right into spoilers now. I'm just going to jump right into it. So this is easily, hands down, the best episode of the season, and I would rank it probably, I'm going to rank it slightly behind Season 1, Episode 9 from last year as the best episode of the entire series. This had everything that I want Lower Decks to be. I'm wondering where this was all season long, and I'm hoping that the next two episodes can continue doing this. It was just reference after reference, hilarious reference from the original series and Next Generation mostly, but just jam-packed full of references. And it's not like they just kind of vomit out a bunch of references and there's no other meaning to the episode. This was good character stories, and also had some pretty good commentary in the episode as well, which I'll get into in more detail a little bit later. And I also feel that like Lower Decks usually is pretty good at that. I think more like a Family Guy or something like that, which, by the way, I hate the Family Guy. Yeah, I'm not a Seth MacFarlane fan in general, but anyways, like when they just vomit out a bunch of references for the sake of having references, but there's no substance. But not here. Lower Decks, I think, is pretty good at avoiding that. When they have references, it's meaningful, and this was jam-packed with so many wonderful references. I love this episode so much. All right, so let me get into more detail. I'm not going to exactly go through storylines. I'm going to try to divide it up by character a little bit. This one's a little bit different than the other episodes where you just have Tinty and Rutherford in this corner and Mariner and Bohmler in this corner, Captain Freeman and Ransom in this corner, which is good because I don't like that format. So let me start from the beginning of the episode with our Lower Decks being left on that satellite, and we get our first reference right at the very beginning of the episode, as they make a reference to cause and effect. And I love how the helmsperson, which, by the way, is, I believe, the Trill, who Rutherford has gone on a couple dates with, she will appear later in this episode. We'll get back to her, don't you worry about that. But she says to Captain Freeman, "Oh, Captain, we're getting a distress call, and we're getting it again." And we're getting it again. "Oh, yep, sounds like a time loop. Guess we better go take care of it." And they leave the poor lower deckers behind. And then I did think that Freeman was being kind of a dick to them once they brought them back on board after they left them out there to die because they forgot about them, and they're just like, "Oh, you're fine, whatever." But the commentary here is on how the red shirts, the lower decks, are treated in Star Trek shows, especially in the original series. I did a recent rewatch of the original series, and there are instances where Kirk just has a blatant disregard for the red shirts' lives. Like, seriously, he shouldn't be captain anymore. I always think of the John Locke line from Lost when Boone is telling him about the red shirts in Star Trek and what it means, and he's like, "Yes, sounds like a pretty shitty captain." So it is true. In Star Trek, oftentimes, not only the writers, but the characters seem to have a blatant disregard for lives, for the lives of the red shirts of the lower decks. So I think that was good commentary on that. Then we get this Pandronian drill instructor, and I recognize this species because somewhat recently watched the animated series, and this is another species from the animated series. I forgot to mention a couple weeks ago when they had the episode with the red shirts, that group called the red shirts. One of them was, I forget what they call them, but they're these cat-like creatures that hunch over, and in that episode he was telling Bohmler to not hunch over and to straighten up, which was a little Easter egg to the animated series. A couple weeks later, we have another species from the animated series, the Pandronians, who split up into 3 different parts, and they even talk like they do in the animated series, where they say this one. They refer to themselves as this one. So love the little callback to the animated series. Lower Decks is the only Star Trek show that really can bring in these species from the animated series, these wacky species that you really would have a hard time doing in real life. They work well for animation. They're splitting apart into 3 different pieces. And then she had the little jokes that she threw in there until you get ahead of the game or whatever. So that was cool. Now let's get into the different simulations that the characters go through. So she puts them through these simulations. I'll talk about some of the ones Mariner did, because this is when it's just reference after reference after reference. It was so good. So we start with Mariner doing a drill in the mirror universe, and I love how she thinks this is perfect for her, because she's like, oh, I could just be evil, ho, 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 ho. Because in fact she did this exact thing in season 1 episode 9 that I mentioned earlier, my favorite episode of the series, where she played a villain in this Star Trek movie on the holodeck. And so she's right to think that she should be good at this. The only reason why she fails, we find out later, is because the whole thing is rigged. Because she really should be good at this. She fits right in. And if she ever did go to the mirror universe, she would fit right in. But I love the fact that everybody had beards. And everybody just walked around going, oh, I can't wait to torture people. Oh my god. And then when Mariner bumped in the shacks, and he's like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I bumped into you on purpose. He's like, oh, okay. It was so good. It's so good. I love just how Mariner was just hamming it up. I love this so much. And as I mentioned, we find out later that the whole thing is rigged, and that's why Mariner fails. Otherwise, she should pass this with flying colors if it were a real test. Then she goes to the Western town, and I love that they did this, because there's been so many bad Western episodes. And my top 10 least favorite original series episode list and my top 10 least favorite Next Generation episode list, there is a Western episode in each of those. I don't think Deep Space Nine ever did one, otherwise I might have put one in my least favorite list for them as well. But a part of me actually wish that they parodied this, did a longer parody of this a little bit more. I wish they did a little bit more, because I hate them so much, and it would have been fun to see them make fun of them even more. But then another part of me is glad that all they did was this little quick horse gag, like the horse, stomping on her, and that was it, because I hate the Westerns and I don't really want to see them that much. So actually, I think in the grand scheme of things, I'm glad they just did the little horse gag. And then Mariner goes to the Naked Time, which here is taken literally. Which I thought was fantastic. Now, once again, as I talked about last week, Lower Decks is getting risque. I mean, Lower Decks is always more risque than the rest of Star Trek, but I feel like they're getting more risque every week. And right now, I'm here for it. I think if they take it to the next step, I might. This is probably right on the edge of where I'm comfortable with this kind of risque stuff in a Star Trek show, but I thought it was hilarious. And here's where we see the return of that Trill helmsperson I mentioned earlier, who I believe is the same person who went on a couple dates with Rutherford in season 1 and season 2. She's making out with Jennifer, the Andorian, in a hot tub, and then just all kinds of crazy stuff is going on. Like, just pretty much everyone is having sex, and it's just really traumatic for Mariner, who actually gets maybe a little bit of trouble from seeing Shax naked, and then she thinks of it later. I actually thought that was good. I thought that was handled well. So, love all of this. And then we have Tindy. She goes into a parody of a lesser-known episode than any of those other ones, the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Ethics, in which Worf gets paralyzed and demands that he be killed in this ritual, Klingon ritual thing, because he can no longer walk. And I loved this. I love that the Klingon said he broke his back from picking up a peanut. He's like, I broke my back from picking up a peanut. Which is commentary on the fact that Worf, when he got paralyzed, after all the dangerous away missions he's been on, after all the battles with the Romulans and the fights with other Klingons in the House of Duras and all of the stuff Worf has been through, he gets paralyzed because a freaking crate falls on him. I mean, and I get it, those are real dangers too, but I'm just saying, like, after all the crazy extreme stuff that Worf goes through, they decided to do an episode about a crate falling on him in the cargo bay. So I felt that this was direct commentary to that I broke my back picking up a peanut. Now, of course, they treated the opposite way in which the Next Generation episode treated it, where Dr. Crusher absolutely would not let Worf kill himself. She said, no way in hell. But here, they were like mad at Tindy for not, killing him. Like, and I love the little scene where they're like, time of life, whatever. I love the time of life line, kind of the opposite. And again, this makes sense once you realize that the whole thing is rigged. So otherwise, I did think that was a little weird that the people were behaving like that in that simulation sense. In the actual episode, it was the opposite. But it makes sense once you find out that reveal later on in the episode. And then Rutherford gets to go as Star Trek II, The Wrath of God. And his test is called the good of the many. And I absolutely love that. This is just reference after reference after reference. They're so good, so good. And I love that he can't save the ship because it's too hot and he can't open the door and he's just burning himself. So finally he thinks to put his boots on his hands, and then by the time he opens the door, the ship blows up. And once again, makes sense once you realize that everything is rigged. Now, let's get into the Bohmler of it all. I love this. I love this so much. So I love that when he first tries to improve his score, he does it by saving the Borg babies, and then he goes back and saves the Borg babies and some other Borg too, and then it just gets progressively more ridiculous. And then all of a sudden, like later on, he has a shuttlecraft out of nowhere instead of the the Borg spear. I love this. Now, just to address a possible plot hole here as to why is Bohmler's test not rigged? Why is he able to get better scores? And I don't know. It could be multiple reasons. It could be because he found some kind of loophole, or it could be as the drill instructor says later about the horses, she just forgot about the horses. Maybe she just forgot to do this one. Or it could just be so the show could happen. And you know what? Because I love this sequence so much, so the show could happen is a perfectly fine explanation for me. So I'm not getting caught up at all about why this one wasn't rigged and why Bohmler was able to continue to get better scores on it. There could be multiple explanations for it. I love it so much that I just don't even care. So then we get the Borg Queen. The Borg Queen, actually voiced by Alice Krieg, the original Borg Queen from First Contact, who also appeared as Borg Queen in the Voyager series finale Endgame. Now, if you know anything about my channel, if you have watched my videos for the past 2 weeks, I have the past 2 weeks in a row have released a video in which I complain about how much the Borg Queen sucks and how much I hate her. So, hands down, this is the best appearance of the Borg Queen of all time because they're making fun of her. And she deserves to be mocked. And I just love her in this episode. This is the only way I ever want to see the Borg Queen ever again. Now, it has an interesting... I'm going to jump to the ending a little bit as I'm talking about Bohmler's storyline. So at the end, he has to keep it going so the rest of them can do their thing. And he's a hero for doing this. And this is where the name of the episode comes from. He turns into Excretus. And he's a little bit traumatized from it. And I think as the ending credits are about to end or about to roll, he says something along the lines of, "I'm traumatized," or something like that. Now, you can say, well, that's not funny, whatever, but, it's a simulation. This is not the same as actually being assimilated by the Borg like Captain Picard was. And I'm not trying to say that he won't have nightmares or this won't affect him for a little while. It would. It definitely would affect him for a little while. But in the long term, he's not going to be as affected as... He's not going to have trauma the way Captain Picard did. Because it's a simulation. So he'll get over it. It's fine. One last thing, though, I wanted to mention of Bohmler before moving on to the next thing is that continuing with what I talked about last week, this episode once again, and I would say for the third episode in a row, so actually what I talked about the last 2 weeks to be more precise, is that Bohmler is on a command path. They're setting him on the path to be a commander or a captain someday, so they have to go that way now. I feel like they're fully committed. They've already demoted him once to ensign from a lieutenant junior grade. He's got to go back up to lieutenant junior grade. I'm sorry. I know the show's called Lower Decks, supposed to be about ensigns, but the way they keep setting him up on this command path, they can't hold him back forever. He can't be a Harry Kim. So I would be curious to see what they do within the next 2 episodes with this. I have a feeling we're going to see William Bohmler by the end of this season. I would almost guarantee it. So I'm curious to see how they handle this moving forward. So now let's talk about the bridge crew. I actually really loved the misdirect that their simulation was just them hanging out, laying around on the lower decks bunks, and how easy things were. But then it turns out they were really just hanging out on the actual lower deck bunks and nothing had started yet. So when they go to their actual simulation, then they do start to appreciate how unappreciated the lower decks are and how they are out of the loop and don't understand what is happening. So I thought that was good. Now, it bordered on a cliche, but I love that they again did a little misdirect where they did not do the cliche thing and have the solution be what Mariner and Freeman thought it was, which was, oh, I see, she was really just trying to teach us team building and trying to see in the other person's shoes. Good job. They went to the drill instructor and like, oh, well, you did a good job of teaching us team building. And I would have hated it if that was all it was, but I love what they did much better, which is that the Pandronian was just like, no, that's not what I was doing. I was trying to fail you so I could keep my job. Whoa! And she's all evil. And I absolutely love the resolution of this, where they just keep going to different disaster. I love that there's crystalline entities, yet another reference. And then they do like the Star Trek the motion picture thing where they're going through the rainbow thing. Little over the top, but this is Lower Decks. They can get away with that kind of thing. And I absolutely love that that's how they solved this issue. And then, as I mentioned earlier with Bohmler, then he is able to hang in there to keep it going, so she can't call Starfleet and fail them because he still has his test ongoing. And absolutely loved all of that. So there's another interesting bit of commentary here, or at least I thought it was, with the drill instructor, because I have seen that person before. Not a Pandronian who can split themselves into 3 parts. Not even necessarily a drill instructor, but somebody who is responsible for judging workers, somebody with a clipboard who's taking notes and is grading workers, or whether in the corporate world, or I've seen it in the world of education too, or something similar to that, where they are really high on themselves, they are really high on the power that they have over you, and they're just complete dicks. And it's funny to me that in the end they said, she quit. Because that always happens with these people. I always hear about these people that were dicks, who are judging people who are doing jobs that they have no understanding of, which was the case here too. And that was the point of what they did, that she has no actual understanding of what she's judging. And this happens so much in the corporate world, where you have somebody coming with a clipboard judging you and being all high and mighty when they actually have not the slightest clue what it's like to do what you do. And those people always quit or get fired. I always hear about that. This is so true to life. So I love that. And in the end, this episode was just all about humility and learning not to take for granted what others do, whether you're the lower decks looking up at the command crew or the command crew looking down at the lower decks. You would realize that they're all essential, they're all needed, and I thought that was a very good message. And it was done in a non-cliche way. It was done in a very good way, in a very hilarious way, jam-packed with references. So this was just so good. So good. Okay. So I think I can go ahead and start to wrap things up for this week's episode, and I'm going to give my rating now. So every week I give a rating out of 10. 1 is the lowest possible score. 10 is the highest possible score. And this week's episode, Excretus, is a 10, an absolute 10. This is, as I said, I think the second best episode in the series, very close to the best episode of the series, just jam-packed with wonderful references. Hilarious episode, which I'm just rolling laughing throughout the whole thing, with good character beats for all of the characters, good commentary on Star Trek, good commentary on the world at large. This is what Lower Decks should be. I want every Lower Decks episode to be this. I know that's not possible. Not every Lower Decks episode can be this, but maybe the next 2 could also be this. That would be good. If the next 2 are also this good, then I will officially say season 2 is better than season 1 overall. But we'll see. I don't know if they can pull that off or not, because this is about as good as it gets, in my opinion. Anyways, that's it for this week. Thank you for joining me. I will be back next week to tell you about episode 9. I also have other Star Trek stuff on my channel, including best and worst list for TOS, TNG, and DS9. So check out that and check out everything on my channel. Please subscribe. Hit that subscribe button below, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.